His wife whispered, "Soon everything he owns will be mine." What she didn't know was that her dying husband heard every word and quietly set in motion the most brilliant revenge plan ever recorded. Stay tuned, because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about legacy, justice, and a final twist that will leave you speechless. J.D. Miller had built his life with calloused hands and long days, 20 years in construction, turning abandoned lots into neighborhoods. His company, Miller Construction, was behind half the affordable housing in South Atlanta. He wasn't just rich, he mattered. At 45, he should have been celebrating milestones. Instead, he was fighting stage 3 pancreatic cancer and counting months. The latest chemo session had drained him more than usual. His bones ached, his balance swayed, and when he stepped through the door of his Buckhead mansion, the place barely felt like his own. It had changed. Colder, cleaner. Monica's touch was everywhere. Stylized furniture, floral arrangements refreshed twice a week, and a silence that had become too comfortable. He didn't expect a welcome. Monica rarely greeted him these days. She was always at the spa, getting treatments or running errands. Still, he heard her voice before he saw her, soft, flirtatious, and clearly not meant for him. His days are numbered. Everything he owns will be mine. J.D. froze. The voice was unmistakable. Monica was in the kitchen, her back to him, phone pressed to her ear. She giggled lightly like a teenager sneaking out of class. "I can finally be with you, baby," she whispered. "You have no idea how exhausting this has been. Playing the grieving wife? Sitting through hospital visits like I care? But soon, it's done. A few more weeks. The doctor says he might not even last that long." JD's heartbeat turned to thunder. For a moment, he thought the chemo was making him hallucinate. But her words were too precise, too cruel. He leaned against the wall to steady himself and listened. "Marcus, I'm serious," Monica continued. $12 million. His will still names me. The house, the company, everything. I talked to the estate lawyer, discreetly. It all goes to me the second he dies." She laughed again, a sound that once made JD cancel meetings just to hear it at dinner. Now it was a blade. He could have confronted her, walked into the kitchen and demanded an explanation. But something deeper held him back. Not fear, not confusion, clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the real Monica, the one he hadn't seen until now. He stepped back silently, climbed the stairs with every ounce of strength he had left, and sat on the edge of their bed. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of what he thought was love, respect, and loyalty. He remembered her sitting beside him the day of his diagnosis, gripping his hand like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She had cried. He had believed her. She had kissed his forehead, fed him soup, scheduled appointments, researched experimental treatments late into the night. Now he saw it for what it was, rehearsal. While he dreamed of remission, she dreamed of beachfront property in Miami. While he planned another safety initiative for his crew, she planned her escape. While he thought they were fighting for time together, she was counting down the days to his funeral. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't cry either. What replaced grief wasn't anger, it was focus. By morning, JD had made his first decision. Monica wouldn't get a single penny. He wasn't going to scream. He wasn't going to argue. He was going to build something stronger than confrontation. She had turned his final months into a countdown. Fine. He'd flipped the clock. The countdown was hers now. He opened his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't used in years but always kept close. Richard Hayes, attorney. By 11 a.m., he was in Hayes, Milton and Associates, sitting across from the man who had helped him incorporate Miller Construction when all JD had was a beat-up truck and a notepad full of blueprints. JD told Richard everything. The phone call, the lies, the plans she had for his money and legacy. Richard didn't interrupt. When JD finished, he leaned back and said, "If you want noise, we can make it loud. If you want certainty, we'll make it surgical." "Surgical," JD said. "She should discover the truth at the exact second she believes she's won." They got to work immediately. No emotion, no theatrics, just clean, legal precision. And while Monica smiled through social gatherings, posed as the heartbroken spouse, and kept checking the calendar in her mind, JD planned the moment it would all collapse beneath her feet. He didn't want revenge. He wanted truth to stand on its own, and when it did, he wanted the whole world to see it. Monica moved through the mansion like everything was normal. She brought JD breakfast in bed, left for appointments, and returned with stories of how exhausting it was keeping up appearances. Friends called her a rock, an angel, the picture of loyalty. She accepted their praise with a humble smile and a lowered voice, carefully measured for sympathy. JD said little. He let her believe he was growing weaker, more detached, less alert. In truth, his mind had never been sharper. Behind closed doors, the plan was unfolding. Richard Hayes worked discreetly but efficiently. They reviewed JD's existing will, still naming Monica as the sole beneficiary, and quietly replaced it with a new legal structure. Trusts were created. Charities were vetted. Every cent, every asset, every share of Miller Construction was redirected to a new purpose. None of it went to Monica. JD wasn't trying to humiliate her publicly. Not yet. He was building a legal wall she wouldn't see coming until it was too late. The irony was that Monica helped cement her own downfall with every fake tear and staged hug. JD had only one final act left to complete, his message. On a Friday afternoon while Monica was at the spa, Richard arrived with a small production crew, just a cameraman and a sound tech. No script, no lights, just JD in a plain shirt that hung a little loose after months of chemo. They sat him in a chair and clipped on the mic. "If you're watching this," JD began, "then I'm no longer here to say it myself." He spoke for nearly half an hour, calm, steady, and direct. He described what he had overheard. He detailed the betrayal. But more than that, he explained his values, why he had built his business, what legacy meant to him, and why he couldn't let it all be handed to someone who saw his death as a payday. He never raised his voice. He didn't insult Monica. He simply told the truth. And truth, spoken clearly, didn't need anything else. When the recording ended, Richard placed the flash drive in a sealed envelope and locked it in his office safe. The plan was complete. JD spent the following weeks in silence. He continued to let Monica play her part. She fussed over him, publicly, cried at the right moments, made appearances at support groups. She told people she was doing her best to stay strong. Privately, JD watched. He noticed how she always checked her phone with her back to him, how she avoided eye contact when she returned from her errands, how she spoke just a little too gently, like she was talking to someone already gone. She didn't know he was listening. She didn't know he was still building. A few days before the end, JD asked Richard to stop by one last time to finalize the scheduling. The plan would activate immediately upon his death. Every detail was covered, from asset transfers to public statements. There would be no delays, no loopholes, no appeals. Monica wouldn't have time to adjust or manipulate. She would find out everything at once, exactly as JD intended. In his final days, JD found peace. He'd made his decision, secured his legacy, and ensured the truth would be revealed. Not with drama, but with certainty. He didn't spend those last moments thinking about Monica. He wrote letters to his team, short notes of gratitude hidden in official memos. He passed on final instructions that made it clear the company would survive and thrive without him. He even made a donation to a safety program in the name of a crew member who had died years ago, back when the company was just starting. Monica, meanwhile, continued her performance. She scheduled a private nurse for appearances. She called friends and gave vague updates that always ended in some version of, "He's fading, but I'm staying strong." She ignored the second phone vibrating under the sink drawer, except when no one was watching. She thought she had won. JD let her. When the end finally came, it was quiet. Monica was at his side, her hand gently resting on his as he took his last breath. She squeezed it for effect. His mother, Margaret, held the other. Monica made sure the moment looked just right. She cried on cue, held the gaze of the hospice nurse, and whispered something about how much he'd meant to her. Then she got to work. She called the funeral home, arranged the service, selected the music, wrote a eulogy that focused more on her role as the devoted wife than on JD himself. She stood at the podium in front of a packed church and spoke about strength, love, and commitment. People wept, and Monica watched them, carefully. She didn't notice the man in the third row, clean cut, emotionless, unfamiliar. He didn't approach anyone. He left before the final hymn ended. She didn't know he worked for Richard Hayes, nor did she know that in just a few days, at the will reading, everything she thought she had secured would vanish in the space of a sentence. Monica believed she had successfully orchestrated the end of her husband's life. She was wrong. JD had orchestrated the end of her illusion, and soon the mask would come off, whether she was ready or not. Monica walked into Hayes Milton and Associates like she already owned the place. Her expression was measured, confident, softened just enough to signal grief, but not too much to obscure the quiet satisfaction she carried beneath it. She had rehearsed this day. Everything was going according to plan. She greeted the receptionist with a gentle smile, handed off her coat, and entered the conference room where the reading would take place. Margaret Collins was already there, JD's mother, seated at the far end of the table with a handkerchief folded neatly in her lap. Two of JD's longtime employees, Ben Carter and Alicia Reed, sat on the opposite side. Both looked uneasy, like they had been summoned to something more complicated than a routine formality. Monica took her seat at the head of the table. Richard Hayes entered last, a slim folder tucked under one arm, a laptop in the other. He offered no pleasantries. "Before we begin the reading of J.D. Miller's last will and testament," he said, "there is a personal message Mr. Miller requested be viewed by all present." Monica straightened her posture, ready for a glowing tribute. A recorded message made sense. She assumed it would be filled with love, perhaps a final note of thanks, maybe even a message of comfort to justify the legacy he was leaving her. Richard opened the laptop, pressed play, and stepped aside. The screen lit up. JD appeared, seated, thinner than most remembered, but steady-eyed. His voice, when it came, was clear and calm. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I'm no longer here. And that's exactly how it has to be for this message to make sense." The room fell silent. "Monica," JD said, "this part is for you." Monica's fingers curled slowly around the arms of her chair. Her expression froze. "I heard you," JD continued. "That day you thought I was still at the clinic. I heard your call to Marcus. I heard every word, the laughter, the promises, the way you counted my days like they were steps on a staircase leading to your new life." No one in the room moved. "I'm not speaking out of anger," he said. "I'm speaking out of truth. Because truth is what I built my life on. My business, my relationships, my values. And I couldn't let my final act be a lie." Monica shifted in her chair. Her eyes darted toward Richard, then back to the screen. "You knew exactly what you were doing," JD said. "And I know now, too. That's why I changed everything. Quietly, legally, permanently." Alicia inhaled sharply. Ben looked away, jaw clenched. "I didn't do this to punish you," JD added. "I did it to protect what matters. What I spent my life building. What you saw as a payout, I saw as purpose. I couldn't let that purpose die with me." He paused for a beat, letting the silence fill the space like an exclamation point. "What happens next won't feel like comfort," he said. "It will feel like consequence. That's not the same thing." Then softer. "I loved the man I was when I tried to love you. That man deserves better than to be remembered as someone fooled to the very end." The video ended. The screen went black. No one said anything. Monica stood halfway, as if she might walk out, but stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "Character assassination," she said, trying to control her tone. "He wasn't in a state to—" "We will proceed," Richard interrupted without looking at her. "This video is accompanied by a notarized statement of sound mind and additional legal documentation." He opened the folder. Monica's lips parted, but no more objections came. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, face expressionless, waiting for the list of assets to begin rolling in. Richard began with the formalities. Specific bequests. A scholarship fund in JD's father's name for underprivileged students in trade programs. A safety research endowment for job site innovations. Donations to organizations focused on transitional housing. Ben nodded slowly. Alicia blinked back tears. Then came the part Monica had waited for. Residual estate provisions, Richard read, to be implemented through the trust instruments. 70% of the estate, including all corporate shares, are to be transferred to the Atlanta Children's Home. These funds are designated for housing, education, and support services for youth aging out of foster care. Monica's breath caught. 30%, Richard continued, is allocated to Margaret Collins for personal use and charitable activity in J.D. Miller's name. He looked up briefly, then down again. And to Monica Miller, no distribution is granted. The words hung in the air like smoke. Monica's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then finally, no distribution? She echoed. That is correct. I'm his wife, she said louder now. This isn't legal. I was his wife. Richard didn't raise his voice. The documents were signed, witnessed, and filed in accordance with Georgia state law. You can't be serious, Monica's voice cracked. He can't take everything from me. He didn't take it, Richard said. He gave it elsewhere. Monica stood abruptly. Her chair slid back and tipped over with a loud clatter. This is fraud, she said. This is a setup. I was there for him. I held his hand. I stayed. There's additional documentation, Richard replied calmly, including records of financial mismanagement and a second phone used for concealed communications. If necessary, those records will be made available to the court. Monica stared at him, but saw something beyond him, something she hadn't prepared for. Defeat. There would be no legal battle, no inheritance, no rescue. Just the consequences of what she thought no one would ever hear. JD had stripped away the illusion at the exact moment she thought she had won. The story she rehearsed for the cameras, the sympathy, the lifestyle, it all vanished in a single sentence. And for the first time in a very long time, Monica Miller had nothing left to say. The silence after the will reading was suffocating. No one tried to comfort Monica. No one offered her an explanation. Her grief had been exposed for what it was: strategy. Her tears rehearsed, her kindness conditional. And now her future, completely rewritten by a man she believed was too weak to fight back. She left the law office with quick steps and no plan. The press didn't catch her on the way out. Richard had made sure the reading took place behind closed doors. But word spread, not through headlines, but through the people who had been in the room. The ones who mattered, Ben Carter told his crew. Alicia Reed shared with the Apprentice program. Within days, the city that had once praised Monica's strength had gone silent. The phone stopped ringing, invitations stopped arriving. Her name wasn't spoken in rooms where she used to be the center of attention. Monica tried to recover. She called lawyers. None would take her case. The estate plan was airtight. She reviewed the footage again and again, convinced there was a way to discredit JD's statement, to prove diminished capacity. But the paperwork was precise. The video clear, and her own words, the ones JD had overheard, were now preserved as part of the legal record. Then came the financial fallout. Without access to JD's accounts, Monica found herself frozen out of everything: the joint accounts, the investment portfolios, the property titles. The Buckhead mansion, technically owned through the company, was sold within months. The proceeds went to funding transitional housing for teens aging out of foster care, just as JD had arranged. Monica moved into a rental, smaller, unfurnished. A place where neighbors didn't ask questions because they didn't know who she used to be. For the first time in years, Monica had no audience. Her inner circle evaporated. Those who had once praised her devotion now ignored her messages. Former friends stopped replying. A charity board quietly removed her name from their website. The club where she hosted luncheons reassigned her locker and returned her last membership check without a note. In private, she unraveled. Monica cycled through denial, anger, bitterness. She told herself JD had been cruel, that he had manipulated the narrative, that she was the real victim. But none of it brought her money. None of it brought her back into the world she once controlled with charm and calculation. Meanwhile, JD's legacy was becoming impossible to ignore. Miller Construction didn't fold after his death. It flourished. Leadership passed to a group of longtime employees who preserved the company's standards. They didn't change the mission. They expanded it. Safety protocols remained strict. Projects continued serving underserved communities. And for the first time, 2 teenagers from the children's home funded by JD's trust joined as apprentices. Ben mentored one, Alicia trained the other. They didn't do it for Monica to see. They did it because JD would have wanted it. Then came the unveiling. 2 summers later, the Atlanta Children's Home opened a new facility, the J.D. Miller Memorial Wing. The dedication drew city officials, donors, and staff. No ribbon-cutting ceremony included Monica. Her name was nowhere on the plaque. Her story was no longer part of the narrative. Margaret Collins stood before the crowd that day. J.D.'s mother, quiet, reserved, strong in a way Monica had only pretended to be. She thanked those who made the project possible. She mentioned her son only once, but it was enough. He told me, she said, that if he ever made it big, he wanted it to matter. And now it did. Inside the new wing were counseling rooms, study lounges, dorms with clean bedding, and secure locks. Kids who had aged out of the system now had a place to land. Laptops were stacked neatly in workstations. Job boards were posted in the hallway. A small clinic offered basic health care. A garden behind the building grew vegetables and herbs that the residents helped plant and tend. It didn't look like revenge. It looked like purpose. JD's voice was no longer needed. His actions said everything. He had taken the life Monica tried to seize and turned it into something greater, something lasting. She never visited the memorial. She couldn't. To go there would mean seeing what could have been hers and understanding why it wasn't. Monica didn't disappear entirely. There were rumors. Some said she left Atlanta for a quiet suburb. Others said she stayed, living in the kind of anonymity she once pitied in others. Either way, she was no longer part of the city's future. The people JD had chosen, his crew, his mother, the kids at the home, they were the ones who carried his name forward. Monica had tried to erase him with time. JD had answered with legacy. She gambled everything on his death. He waited until it arrived, to show her exactly who had lost. Every Tuesday, Margaret Collins walked through the front gate of the Atlanta Children's Home, carrying a canvas tote bag filled with books. The kids called her Grandma Margaret, even though none were related. She read aloud for an hour, stories about builders, nurses, firefighters, pilots, people who made things work and kept them standing. Some children sat close and listened. Others lingered near the back, pretending not to care, but still hearing every word. When story time ended, she stayed behind to help with homework or sit beside kids who didn't want to be alone. She did it quietly, without ceremony. She never mentioned Monica. There was no need. The new wing of the home spoke louder than any story. Funded entirely by JD's estate, it offered more than beds and meals. It provided safety, direction, and stability. Former foster youth used its resources to enroll in community college, complete trade certifications, or simply catch their breath before starting a new chapter. It became a bridge between survival and success. Inside, a wall displayed framed photos of the first recipients of the Miller Promise Scholarship. Each plaque listed a name, a program, and the year of graduation. The hallway carried the hum of ambition, of kids moving forward without waiting for the world to notice them. That was what JD wanted, not attention, not recognition, impact. He'd once said to Margaret, "Legacy is just a word until someone lives in it." And now they did. Miller Construction, under new leadership, continued its mission. It remained focused on affordable housing and safe job sites. The motto JD had insisted on, building dreams, building lives, was still printed on every hard hat. His former employees didn't quote him often, but they followed his example in small, consistent ways. Double-checking harnesses, mentoring apprentices, refusing shortcuts. 2 teens from the children's home interned with the company their first summer out. One joined the engineering team. The other trained in safety management. Neither knew Monica. Neither needed to. The Buckhead mansion that once symbolized wealth and control was sold. The money from its sale funded after-school transportation, laptops, and startup kits for teens moving into their first apartments. JD had made sure his wealth served a purpose larger than pride. And Monica? Her name faded from conversation. Not because people forgot, but because they stopped caring. Former acquaintances now treated her as a cautionary story, someone who gambled on timing and underestimated character. No charges were filed, no lawsuits followed. JD had chosen restraint, not because she didn't deserve worse, but because he didn't want his legacy reduced to punishment. He chose to build, not destroy. Last anyone heard, Monica lived in a quiet rental on the outskirts of the city. She no longer appeared at fundraisers. Her once public life was now private by necessity. Her silence wasn't dignified, it was forced. The woman who once scheduled spa days during her husband's chemotherapy treatments now scheduled nothing. Her calendar was empty. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive in courtrooms, it arrives in outcomes. JD never sought revenge in the way people expect. He didn't shout, accuse, or drag Monica through the media. He left her nothing. Not out of hatred, but because she deserved nothing. He didn't give her consequences. He removed her from the story, and that decision reshaped everything. The children's home continued to expand. More rooms, more staff, more young adults finding their footing. JD's mother kept showing up. His employees kept mentoring. His name lived not on billboards or luxury buildings, but on the futures he helped make possible. That was the legacy. A few years later, on the anniversary of the Wing's opening, the children's home hosted a celebration. Not a formal event, just music, food, and games. Former residents came back to visit. A few wore scrubs from nursing programs. Others had calloused hands from welding or construction work. Some had degrees. Some just had peace. A girl named Tasha stood by the garden and asked Grandma Margaret what JD had been like. Margaret didn't answer right away. She watched the kids laughing, the staff smiling, the counselors checking in quietly with kids who were having a harder day. Then she said, "He was someone who didn't just build things, he made sure they lasted. That was all." JD Miller wasn't perfect. He didn't win every battle. But when it mattered most, he stood for something bigger than pride, bigger than ego. He saw betrayal, and instead of matching its ugliness, he created something beautiful. He gave everything away, but in doing so, he kept everything that mattered. His story wasn't about loss, it was about what remains when the wrong people are gone and the right ones keep building.